We are going to record this so that those who aren't able to join us live can watch it after the fact. And we also are about to go live on Facebook. So if you are on Facebook, we'd love for you to go to Teach Plus PA's page and share that link as well so that others can tune in. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our webinar on early childhood education in Pennsylvania. My name is Laura Boyce. I'm the Pennsylvania Executive Director of Teach Plus. Our mission is to empower excellent, experienced, and diverse teachers to take leadership over key policy and practice issues that advance equity, opportunity, and student success. We do that through a few different types of programs. We have a teaching policy fellowship that prepares more than 500 policy fellows across the country to expand their influence beyond the four walls of their classroom. And you'll get a chance to meet some of those amazing teachers in our Pennsylvania Policy Fellowship in just a moment. We also have professional learning and instructional leadership programs in many states, including in Pennsylvania, where we work with teacher leaders to improve teaching and learning across their schools. If you haven't already, we'd love to invite you to join Teach Plus Pennsylvania's statewide teacher network. This is open to any educators, including early childhood educators. You had the opportunity to opt in when you registered, but you also can sign up now or at any time. This is a way to learn about other policy issues from early childhood education to equitable school funding to teacher preparation to culturally affirming schools and diversifying the teacher pipeline. So if you are an educator, including a retired educator, a former educator, we'd love to stay in touch with you. And we'd also like to acknowledge our partners, Start Strong PA, who are a co-sponsor of today's event. Start Strong PA, if you aren't familiar with them, is the statewide early learning campaign that is dedicated to childcare. Start Strong believes that every child deserves an equal opportunity to a quality educational foundation that will prepare them to grow, learn, and succeed. And they call on Pennsylvanians to focus on the most important years of a child's development, the first 3 years of life. And you can see the focus areas that they focus on there. And I'd like to acknowledge Jen DeBell, one of our panelists, who is also one of the leaders of the Start Strong campaign. So thank you so much for being a co-sponsor of today's event. I'd like to introduce to you our Teach Plus Early Childhood Education Working Group Policy Fellows. These educators are the force behind today's event and are really passionately working for change in the early childhood sector. First, Leda Rosario is a kindergarten English as a second language teacher in the Allentown School District. Bree Rice, who will also be serving as a panelist today, is the Center Staff Support Manager at JB's Bright Beginnings in Irwin. Donna Kilgore is a pre-K counts teacher at Bloom Early Education Center in Swoyersville. Laura Smith is a teacher and center director at Capital Area Head Start in Harrisburg. Jessica Roberts is a pre-K counts teacher in the Warrior Run School District in Watsontown. And Brandy Hester Harrell is a Teach Plus Senior Policy Fellow and Educational Consultant in Philadelphia. So welcome to our teachers who are going to be serving as the moderators of today's discussion, except for Bree, who will also be serving on the panel. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Laura Smith, who is going to introduce our panelists.
All right, it is my pleasure to introduce our panel of experts this evening. First, we have Lindsay Ramsey, who is the Assistant Director of Policy and Practice at Trying Together. As mentioned before, we have Bree Rice, who is the Program Specialist for JB's Bright Beginnings. Karen Grimm-Thomas is the Director of External Relations with the Office of Child Development and Early Learning. Jen DeBell, the Executive Director of PennAC, which is the Pennsylvania Association for the Education of Young Children. Kathleen was going to be a parent representative, but was unable to join us today. So we will try to incorporate some parent perspective in other questions. And hopefully we hear from other panelists on that. And then we also have Kate Woods, who is the Chief Compliance Officer with the Schweiger Dermatology Group, and she is a member of the PA Early Learning Investment Commission. And now I'll turn it over to Brandy to go over some norms.
Thank you so much. So I'm excited today for our panel discussion. We have a great panelist. Each panelist will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and we would love to have our audience engage with us. So feel free to take out your phone and to scan this if you have the app, or as well as the link, which is in the chat for Slido. If you're unfamiliar with this, you are able to elevate questions, and you're going to go ahead and you can push questions up. The ones that are at the top are the ones that we will pick at the end to ask the panelists. And our goal is that all voices are heard. So if you have a question, ask it. We look forward to working with you this evening. I'm going to pass it over to our fellows.
All right, thank you, Brandy. I will get started this evening. So this question is for all of our panelists. We'd like all of you to think about what brings you to this discussion this evening and why is early childhood and education and care so important. So in your best way, under a minute, I'm going to pitch this question to all of our panelists. So let's start with Lindsay.
Thanks, Laura. I would say that I view early childhood education as being a crucial piece of a baseline for equity for all people in our nation. So I think it's really important that there's access to high quality early childhood education and services for all children and families.
Thank you. Let's go to Karen next.
Thank you. So I guess when I think of early childhood education, I think of it as kind of like a three-pronged bang for your buck. So we have what it can do for young kids in terms of helping them actually, really reach their full potential as they enter the K-12 system and as they go on and figure out what they want to do with their lives. I think of it as, the thing that really kind of supports families in being able to be a self-sustaining unit and take care of their family and feed themselves and clothe themselves. And then I think of it as an economic driver in the state. We know that, if folks don't have access to childcare, it's difficult for them to work, and that impacts businesses. And so if you think I kind of wrap all that up, and it's that triple bang for your buck.
Thanks, Karen. Let's turn it over to Bree.
Great. So for me, early education has played a huge part in my life. I have been in early education for the past 14 years. I worked in a preschool classroom for 10 of those, and now have been on the administrative side of it. So I feel like I can see all of it, along with being a parent of a child who went through early education. So I can see the importance, and I know what a firm foundation will do for a child throughout their whole process in education and their journey. So for me, it is important to be able to express that so that that message gets out there that early education does have a firm foundation, not only for our children, but for their families, for our economy, and for so much more. So I have that love and that passion for early education, and now I want to be able to use my voice to get that love and passion out there to others. So I am so honored to be a part of this fellowship and learning how to advocate for our youngest learners and their families to make, have success the best that they can in their little lives.
Thank you, Bree. Let's turn it over to Kate. Oh, you're on mute, Kate.
All right, thanks. Sorry about that. I'm here as a member of the Governor's Early Learning Investment Commission, which is a commission formed by business leaders who are appointed by the governor to advocate for public-private partnership to fund quality early learning. I will say I come to this conversation for multiple reasons. One, as a business leader, we know that access to quality early learning impacts not only the future of those children, it impacts working families today, and it impacts Pennsylvania's economy. So that's number one, and that's my driving force for the past 13 years as a member of the commission, the main focus. But I will tell you, as a citizen, I fundamentally believe that everyone has the right to access to this quality education. It should not be stratified by social class or economics, which is a win for everybody if we can achieve that. Everybody wins there. And then finally, I would say I'll take the flag of the missing parent. I'm a parent of 4. Every single one of our children has been in early learning. Great programs, and we saw the difference it made in our own children's lives and enhanced what we were offering at home. And it's great. It's great for the kids.
Thank you, Kate. And finally, let's go to Jen.
So all of you said it so well. I think one thing I'll add is that we have to remember the professionals that are offering this care. And we're going to talk a little bit about them a little later today. And as we talk about the opportunities for kids and the need for families, we need to remember that we need to be supportive and provide appropriate compensation for the teachers, directors, and staff in the field as well. And I come to this space as an advocate, and I'm hoping at the end of the day, all of you will all join together, whether that's through Teach Plus, Start Strong PA, to really talk to and educate the policymakers who are the ones who ultimately can make the decisions that'll make a difference for kids, families, and the professionals in the field.
Thank you all so much. I'm sure that everyone I certainly could feel the passion. So I'm excited to see where this evening leads us. Now I'm going to turn it over to my fellow colleague, Donna.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump into it. As we all know, families having equitable access to affordable and high quality childcare and pre-K programs is absolutely critical. Our fellowship through our work has determined that 2 major barriers to this equitable access are adequate funding and awareness among parents of young children and soon to be parents. So I would like to hear what Jen and Bree have to say about how Pennsylvania can best fund and advertise its early childhood programs. Jen, if you'd like to kick us off.
Sure, thanks, Donna. So we believe very strongly we need a commitment both from our state and federal policymakers to prioritize these programs and provide substantial investment in them. But importantly, also long-term investment. And I want to hone in on that because we've been really fortunate to receive a lot of federal funds during the pandemic directed at childcare in particular, but they're temporary. So sustainable funding is really the key to improving the system long-term. Federally, we had a great opportunity with the Build Back Better plan. We're hoping that moves into a Build Back Better 2.0 to be considered. That proposal smartly recognized the need to invest in access for families and high quality programs for kids, but also the investments in the workforce that I talked about earlier that we need. On the advertising front, I'll just put a plug in. We've really been trying to call on our state to try to advertise, in particular, our child care subsidy program that helps parents pay for childcare who aren't able to afford it. We have a good model with our children's health insurance program. I'm sure you've all seen those commercials and targeted marketing at the communities who most need it. So we'd love to see something similar for childcare.
Great, and Bree?
Okay, so mine comes from a little bit of a different angle. Like I said, I work in administration in the child care center that I'm at. So I handle all enrollment inquiries. So when people call to get enrolled, I'm the one that they're asking questions for. So to start, I think that there's just a misunderstanding of what preschool is, what childcare is, what government funded programs are. And parents don't even know what to ask when they're calling to ask. So it really takes on our job when they call to get those questions and start asking and start prodding and finding delicate ways of asking the right questions to get the kids in the right programs so that the families can use what our state does offer to the best of what those families need. So for me, as far as advertising would go, I think it would be more of a campaign to kind of restructure and for our community to see childcare in a different way, that we're not babysitters, that there's a lot that goes into this program, and we do a lot for families and for kids. And maybe also with that to also include a restructuring on what like public programs are and how our society sees them. I get questions like, oh, are they really going to be in that program? And I'm like, yes, that program's amazing. You want to be in that program. Like the stuff is great. The teachers are awesome. Like you want to be, but to get that switch in society so that they're not looking at that program as like that program, but that there's a way to benefit their kiddos. So for me, that's part of where that advertising could go, along with partnerships. I think that the programs that offer the state-run programs, we need better partnerships with them, with the community, with childcare centers, with doctors' offices, with even like the workforce development programs. Like we need to reach out and really make it more about a community. I mean, it takes a village. So let's, use our village to raise these kiddos, and in a way that isn't degrading or isn't making a child or parent feel less than, but that we're encouraging them because they're doing something really great for their kids. And then as far as funding goes, like on my side, I see more maybe like a revamp in the process of how they go in, how parents have to enroll into public funding, or how what documents are needed, or how we can help them better. Are there transportation barriers that we can help them work through? Are we offering the right programs? Are we fulfilling the need of what parents really have? Do they really have a half-day need, or is it really a full-day need? Like, where is that funding going, and how can we maybe restructure it so that we are meeting the needs of our society, of our community, which could be different in different areas, because inner cities and rural, they're gonna draw different things, and families are gonna have different needs, and also maybe some like incentives for programs, to make sure that we're a part of that. As our program, we want to be a part of these things. We want to get out there and make connections and build partnerships within our community and with ELRCs and things like that, so that we can make have our child care center really be able to lift up the kids that it needs to be lifted up, and to reach all of those that we can reach. So those are kind of how we see it, because on a personal level, I try and talk to parents and get those questions answered. And a lot of them have no idea. When I ask them about certain programs, they have no idea what I'm talking about. And that's unfortunate, because these programs are great and they can really help a large amount of our families if we could just get that information out there into their hands.
Great. So it seemed like what I was hearing from both of you on the funding side, our funding needs to be sustainable, substantial, and the process for attaining that needs to be streamlined, which I think would be great. And then on the advertising side of it, it sounded like what both of you were saying was just that our advertising needs to be targeted and focus on a community base. And that also maybe language within our advertising matters, and we really need to be focusing on the language aspect of it, which I completely agree. Even just shifting the terminology from low income families to working families, right? We all like it when it sounds good. We like it when it sounds good for us. So thank you so much for both of your answers, and I'm going to pass it over to Jessica.
Thanks, Donna. We're going to shift over to income for the those of us working within the field. We all recognize that early childhood educators and staff are paid far below our K-12 counterparts. This question is going to be for Karen, Kate, and Lindsay. What do you feel is the impact of that lack of income parity? And then recognizing that, what are your recommendations or solutions to this problem? So, let's start.
Jessica, did you say me first? Sorry, you cut out. Okay, great. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I think that there are numerous impacts to this, the lack of pay parity. I think first and foremost, it indicates that different roles in our system are valued in different ways, and that ECE teachers aren't as valued for the specialized skills that they need. And it makes it really difficult to create a pipeline that ensures adequate staffing if folks don't feel valued at the beginning of that pipeline. It makes it difficult to maintain staff, specifically to maintain staff with the background and the competencies that we know are really critical to providing those quality earlier, environments for our kiddos. Early childhood, it's a unique time in a child's development, and the adults that work with them, they need that specialized knowledge. And it's hard to tell staff that they need those credentials when they're not going to be compensated fairly once they have them. And it increases the chances that they're going to go look for work in other places that will compensate for them, or compensate them for it. And nobody can argue with that. Nobody can say to somebody that it doesn't make sense for you to try to do what's better for your own individual family. So yeah, I think it creates lots of complexities and problems in the system. And I mean, in terms of the solutions, I think some of the things that have already been talked about in terms of funding are, places to start. Jen talked about short-term and long-term things, and I think about it the same way. So in the short term, I think we need to really be thinking about our base rates that we pay childcare providers who are, providing care for our childcare works kiddos. I think we've made progress with that over the last couple of years, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg. The basic problem is that we're not reimbursing for the true cost of care. And that means that providers either need to charge their private pay families more, which we know is not something that families are going to be able to take on, or they end up doing more with less, and that's where we see those lower salaries, and not just the salaries, but overall benefits that most people that have full-time jobs and are professionals think are reasonable to expect from their job: adequate paid time off, health benefits, retirement contributions, all of those things. I think long-term, we need to look to a combination of adequate federal and state investments that increase in a predictable way that can keep pace with inflation, as well as increased private investments that Kate kind of talked about. I think, it's my hope that businesses are going to start to view supporting their employees and talking to their employees about their childcare needs in the same way they would about any other kind of benefit that they offer to them. So, supporting a family that, a worker that has a need in childcare isn't any different than ensuring that they've got health care, or, contributing to their health care, or contributing to their retirement account. So I think we just really need to start to shift the way we look at childcare, and hopefully come out on the other side where everybody is kind of recognizing it as a benefit to society and not just a benefit to individual children and individual families.
Thank you so much, Karen. Kate, if you could weigh in, please.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is I echo everything Karen just said. Could not have said it better. And what I'll add to that is that the COVID pandemic showed, I think, the world, and certainly our nation, what most of us on this call knew, which is that access to quality early learning is not an individual issue. It is part of the fabric of our entire society. Whole businesses were crippled and remain, in many cases, highly dysfunctional because their employees still do not have adequate access to the learning centers they need and the environments that their children need. And we all saw that, parents juggling at home and what that did to working parents. So, I mean, it's like a classic example of a system that's broken, right? The market is telling us the system's broken, and yet too significant a percentage of the market population is still not listening. I mean, when you think about the costs that families spend on average about 15% of their income on early learning environments for their children, labor costs, I don't need to tell anybody on this phone, for those centers are about 80%. It's the majority of centers' budgets. And yet the teachers we have there that are like caring and teaching our youngest members of society, they're paid at the bottom 2% of all professions. I mean, it is really a lopsided environment. We can get into the reasons for that go back 50, 100, 200 years, but now's the time to really attack it from, again, the market perspective. And so while there definitely needs to be adequate state and federal funding, as a business commission member, right, the whole concept is the private public partnership. I see a lot of the solutions as businesses have to be willing and understanding why it's a valuable investment. So things like dependent care FSAs, childcare subsidies for seats, partnering with your childcare centers for priority, emergency, and longstanding, seats for the children of employees, contracted slots, all of those things, and look at it as an employee benefit. As Karen already mentioned, we have, so many businesses are looking at turnover that is far in excess of what it ever was pre-COVID. And a significant portion of that churn and burn can be attributed to the patchwork quilt that our working parents are having to deal with still. And we can attract and retain quality candidates and employees at other businesses if we adequately fund the professionals who are serving one of our society's greatest needs, which is educating our children.
Thank you so much, Kate. Appreciate your thoughts. Lindsay, if we could hear from you, please.
Oh, I absolutely echo what everybody had to say. Early childhood educators and their work has always been undervalued and underfunded. The root of this has historical implications, Kate, like you mentioned, and they're linked to gender and racial biases that have shaped who our nation has viewed as caregivers and the value of those who predominantly do the work. And this equates to the compensation issue for early childhood educators truly being a social justice issue that greatly impacts the quality of life for women and disproportionately women of color. In addition, many of our early childhood educators have revenue that's low enough for them to qualify for subsidies, and they fall below the federal poverty line. This contributes to challenges for recruitment and retention, like we already mentioned, which further fuels that turnover and directly impacts the development of the children who are being served. In addition, individuals living in poverty have heightened experiences of trauma. So our teachers are living in trauma. They're experiencing trauma and poverty, and we're expecting them to deliver high quality services every day. That's not fair for them. And when we think of this and how to solve this, if we're thinking of increasing access and ensuring quality, there's no way that we can do that without centering the needs of the early childhood educators. They are the center of quality, they are delivering the services, and they are impacting these children and families every single day. So just like everybody already mentioned, making sure there's sustainable investments at a federal, state level and ensuring that compensation is available for our educators to thrive so they can help children and families thrive is really crucial to this work.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I definitely heard you on all of that. So I heard impacts on pipeline staffing numbers, quality of care, loss of positions, the bleeding into the other fields, impact on economy, business, and so many great solutions, investments, long-term, short-term. I really love the employer benefit conversations. So thank you so much for your thoughts on all of that. And I am going to turn it over to my fellow Leda.
And I want to say thank you one more time to all of you for being here tonight with us. Great points. And I think our next question is going to echo just the conversation in our last question, which is going to be regarding one of the critical issues that is limiting access to early childhood education programs, and is staff shortages. I would like to hear from Bree and Lindsay. What are your thoughts on how we can increase the ECE pipeline? Bree, if you wouldn't mind to start.
Okay, so like I said, I get to work in the administrative part, which also comes into hiring our staff, which has proved to be quite challenging because we are looking for high quality staff. We want the staff that want to be here, that have the education behind it, and that can prove to be challenging. So one of the ways I feel like we can try and build that pipeline is through apprenticeship programs, which I am honored and privileged to be a part of one currently through Carlow University. And I feel that the way that they have it, the program set up works. There's a mentor at the college. So college is new. It's real. We're taking college classes just like every other college student. So we're writing papers and we're doing that work. But because we have a mentor at the college, they're directing us where to go. If we need help or assistance, they're there to guide that and to lead us. And it has been super helpful. Also, then there's a coach. So we have a coach where we work. So there's somebody who is a level above us in our environment who's there to support us as well. So then we have that program. We also have on-the-job classes, which I have to tell you are amazing. They are so much fun because you're doing the work and you're learning and doing the work and learning. So as you're learning it, you're implementing it instantly. So those things and those traits and the things that we're picking up, they're adding right into your tool belt. And we all know we need tool belts that are deep whenever you're in preschool and working with younger kiddos. So you're doing it as it's going. So I feel like that is just, it has been such an impact. And I have just, like I said, I'm honored to be a part of the program. I am honored to be able to and grateful for the funding that's going into it to make it possible. Because to be honest, I've always wanted to have a degree, but I don't make enough to pay for college debt. And I couldn't. I had a family. I was raising a family. My husband was working. There was no way I could do any of that. I learned, like if you look at my Google, it probably thought I had a 3-year-old for 10 years because I was constantly Googling things to teach myself or taking trainings. But now I have this opportunity because of the funding that is in this program and because of the model that the program has. It's making it doable for me to work a full-time job and take these classes because they have the supports in place. There's somebody there that's helping me, get my classes in order. Whoop, whoop, I only have like a year left and I get to graduate. Like, it's just the way they have it set up is awesome. I also feel like with the pipeline, the encouragement for the high quality programs. We're a Star Force Center. We worked hard. It's a lot of work to get there. We're excited. Our teachers are awesome. We're thankful that a lot of the teachers here have degrees, but they also have husbands that help them, and that's their breadwinner. It's not just them. But because of that, like we're Star Force Center and we used to get funding and there were incentives and things like that for those teachers who had the degrees, and those have slowly slipped away, which make it hard as a privately owned center to continue to make sure we have training that is valid and is useful for our staff to keep up on their hours. And for our staff to have that incentive, because why not go work at a school district where you get all those perks and those benefits when you have that degree anyway. So I feel like to increase our pipeline, it's going to have to go hand in hand with increasing our pay. But I feel like these apprenticeship programs are something that can really benefit our community and really help us expand the people who love it, who are there and have it and know it, but just don't have that piece of paper saying that they can do it. But apprenticeship programs, I feel like, are something that we can fund and really help to, progress this pipeline forward.
Thank you, Bree. Lindsay?
Bree, you had the mic drop right there when you explained your, your process of getting your education. There are so many other early childhood educators out there who have that same story where, they are dedicating their lives to make sure other children and families have support and that they're getting high quality educations, but they can't they can't even afford that for themselves, and they can't afford to provide that for their children either. So investing in those scholarship programs like Teach and other pipeline programs and to our PDO work is really, really crucial in elevating the work of the field. And through those processes and experiences in those programs, that's where our educators gain that power of the profession. They start to understand the value of the work that they do themselves. And that then can transpire to them educating the public on the importance of the work. So that's really important in directly advocating for better compensation and benefits for our educators. Again, Bree, like you mentioned, we can't just pat them on the back for their work. They have to be compensated for all the hard work that they're doing. And again, their families have to be able to reap the benefits of that as well. We have to be able to raise them up. That's equity. And also making sure that there's significant funding going to our ELRCs that can increase the work of our quality coaches and support the work that's being done to help elevate high quality in these centers and elevate, pushing for higher qualifications, professional development, and higher performance of our centers and giving them resources to do so. It's important that we bolster up that piece of the work because they are the ones out in the field making sure that they are providing supports to our educators and providers. So it's really a full circle process. Our educators have to be supported in order for them to support children and families. The field has to have direct support in order to support the educators. We have to be able to properly advocate to elevate the importance of early childhood education for our society.
Thank you, Lindsay and Bree. Great points. And as we've been hearing, better compensation is a key. I've been in this profession for over 22 years and I'm in love every single day. I will not change one day, despite the challenges that we all face. But definitely, thank you, Bree, for that excitement that I can hear in your words, talking about the partnership programs and on the job classes. That sounds very interesting. Thank you, Lindsay. And it is our job to keep advocating for better funding, increasing funding that can really give our teachers, our staff, the payment that the pay that they need, that they deserve, that we deserve, and knowing that we don't care less because we still don't get that pay. Our commitment is to give a high quality education to every single child that comes to our class. And with this, I'm going to pass it to Brandy.
Thank you so much. This is our last question, and then we're going to take it to the panel questions. So if you haven't already, slide over and go ahead and drop a question for our panelists. This has been an amazing conversation. I think we all are excited when we saw the governor release his budget, and we understand that we are moving into state budget season. And we understand that, yes, it's been nice getting pandemic assistance to support children, but we also, Jen, you amplified it. You said, hey, the pandemic, it has shown what's already been there. We recognize that children need early childhood. So now what? And I feel like now that we are at the now what, I would like to propose the question. Can you tell us what has been proposed by the governor and how others can advocate or get involved or push for ECE budget funding for next year? I'm going to start with Karen and then go to Jen.
Okay, thanks, Brandy. And I am going to do a really quick, very high level overview of what's in the budget. And then I'm going to throw it to Jen and Kate to talk about your strategies that you guys can use in terms of advocacy. So different parts of the budget, and I think when I look at it, I think of Octel's parts of the budget. We have things that come in from our DHS side of the house and our things that come in from the PDE, the Department of Ed side of the house. So we've got increased investments in pre-K that the governor proposed. So pre-K counts investments that would increase the cost per child. So hopefully put more money into the pockets of those pre-K counts providers so that they can maybe increase salaries and do those kinds of things for staff. But then also additional dollars to serve more kiddos, make sure that reach of more kids have the chance to get into pre-K counts. So that's a $60 million. And then on the Head Start side of it, Pennsylvania takes state dollars and supports Head Start grantees. The majority of their funding comes from the federal government. You basically say you take that model that you're running, and here are additional state dollars so that you can add seats onto that. So we've got another $10 million that the governor's proposing to put into the Head Start Supplemental Assistance Program. So good investments in pre-K. We've got early intervention in both our 0 to 3 and our 3 to 5 program. We did see some decreases in participation during the pandemic, and things are starting to pick back up. So the investments that the governor's proposing, we're hoping are going to really kind of sustain that and let the program grow the way it needs to now that folks are coming back out of that. There's also a really exciting initiative in the 0 to 3 part of the early intervention budget that would take a look at those kiddos that when mom is experiencing some postpartum depression. We know how important.
Could you say that again? Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry, my Alexa all of a sudden is deciding that it's going to talk to me. Sorry about that. But anyway, we know, if kiddos, if mom's having experiencing postpartum depression, that's really going to impact her ability to bond. It's going to impact the relationship, and so much of what young kiddos are learning, it's based on that relationship. So this would allow allow those kiddos to move into that tracking category, where even if they were screened and it was found that they didn't qualify for earlier intervention, we could go back to them in a couple of months and keep checking on them and just making sure that things are okay. So we're excited about that part of the budget. We've got investments in our evidence-based home visiting program, hoping that we're going to be able to expand that a little bit and serve I think just some more kiddos in that program, because we understand the impacts that can have for families in terms of supporting them around other needs. It's early education in the class, in their homes. It's supporting families and really being their child's first and best teacher. We're excited about. Sorry, I'm just making sure my notes. That Alexa really threw me. We've got, when we look at our childcare part of the budget, we're talking about sustained investments. The governor outlined how he's going to continue to use federal dollars to continue to do some initiatives that he started in January. So we're going to, use those dollars to maintain that 60th percentile in the base payments for providers. We were able to restructure the co-pays for families so that families are not paying more than 7% of their annual income on their copay. And we've also been able to bring back incentivizing the providers who are offering care during non-traditional hours. We know that that's really critical for a lot of families to find that care. So all of those initiatives are going to be able to continue through the 2022-23 budget cycle that the governor put into place starting back in January. There's a couple of other interesting proposals that are kind of outside of Ocdel's budget, but I think really this audience is probably interested in. The governor is again asking for a minimum teacher salary in the state to be set at $45,000. So for our staff that are in pre-K counts programs that are operated by school districts or employed through intermediate units, our LEAs in the state, that would be applicable to them. Those staff need to have their bachelor's degree. They need to have that teaching certificate. So that could, really impact them. And then the governor's also proposed using $30 million to start a new initiative that would support Commonwealth employees in their access to childcare. So those things that we were talking about in terms of, businesses understanding that it's important to support their employees in finding childcare and accessing childcare. The governor is really challenging the Commonwealth to ask itself, are we a model employee or employer? Are we providing those supports to all of the Commonwealth employees across the state? So kind of a two-pronged approach that would look at some of the existing childcare space that's being offered in the Capitol complex already and how to expand that and allow more staff to take advantage of it. But then also being, really sensitive to the fact that there are folks that are working across the Commonwealth, across the state, that work for the state. They're not in the Capitol complex. And for many reasons, folks might not want to necessarily have their kiddos in, in those sites that are within the Capitol. A lot of them have childcare that they're already very happy with. They've deep connections to those programs. So how do they create, subsidies, voucher systems for employees to use in their community-based providers now? I think I've hit all of the points of the budget. I feel like that was like the auctioneer's version of it. If I missed anything, Jen, I'm sure you can kind of call me out on that then.
So thanks, Brandy and Karen. From the advocate's point of view, I want to start out by saying we were really pleased to see the governor's proposed investments in pre-K, both in pre-K counts and Head Start, as well as evidence-based home visiting and early intervention. As Karen said, that new initiative around moms with postpartum depression is very important. So we're really excited to see those. And we're going to be working very hard to make sure that those items are maintained as the General Assembly considers what the governor put forward. But I would really be remiss if I wasn't to say that we were disappointed with what was put forward on childcare. We want to acknowledge the governor for the new federal initiatives that have occurred around lowering co-pays and the increase in the base rate and the non-traditional hours piece that were implemented in January. However, we had hoped to see a new state investment across the Commonwealth, not just for state employees with state dollars. We're going on, I believe it's the 4th year of level state funding for childcare. We recognize that federally we've seen a lot of support during the pandemic, but as I mentioned earlier and Brandy highlighted, those are one-time funds predominantly. So we really want to see both our state government and our federal government move forward with long-term substantial funding that's going to sustain the system for years to come for our kids, our families, and the teachers that are providing these services. So with that said, right now, the General Assembly has started kicking off their appropriations hearings. They basically bring in the secretaries of all the major departments and ask them questions about the budget proposal. And as that concludes, the advocates are going to be working very hard over the coming months. There's a deadline of June 30th to pass the state budget. We hope they'll abide by that timeframe, and we'll be working really hard to educate legislators about the unmet needs in communities across the Commonwealth in the continuum of early learning. So childcare, pre-K, evidence-based home visiting, early intervention, all of it. And with that said, we need your help. It is most important that parents and the teachers and the directors and the staff in the classrooms every day are the ones telling your experiences and stories to lawmakers and to the media. You are the voter at the end of the day. You're their constituent. So it's important for them to hear from people locally who live in their own community about what they're experiencing. If you're a parent that struggled to find childcare, if you're a parent who struggled because they've had classroom closures occur because of teacher shortages, you need to share that. If you're working in a program and you want to share what your pay rate is compared to a K-12 teacher with the same degree, you need to share that. The more education that occurs, the more they're going to understand and hopefully make the investments that we need at the end of the day. So I'm going to drop information into the chat on how you can join us both in the Start Strong PA and Pre-K for PA campaigns. Also, feel free to reach out to myself, Lindsay, with folks out west. I see our partners from First Up are on the chat as well down in the Southeast. Any of us can make connections to this work, get you before your state lawmakers, and hopefully make a really hard push over the coming months to see investments across the continuum of early learning.
Thank you so much, Kate. I know you're next.
Thank you. So I would like to point out something Karen mentioned, which is that the governor proposed a $30 million line item as an employer, right? Not per se as, right, the governor concept, but as the state, as an employer, we're going to invest in an employee benefit that we think is valuable to our employees. And so coming from the private sector, I always think sometimes the government pulls the private sector to where it needs to be, and sometimes private sector pushes the government to where it needs to be. And it's the yin and the yang, and we should always have it going in both directions. So on that regard, I really applaud the governor for putting the state's money where its mouth is. Right? We're asking businesses to do certain things. The government, as an employer, should stand behind its own, mission-driven concept. But I would say everyone on this call knows somebody who works in private business, whether they know an employee, an individual contributor, a manager, a senior management personnel, or all the way up to the C-level. And the business voice is really powerful. It will be able to help push the Pennsylvania government to continue to increase funding. We've seen that over 13 years that PA-ELEC has been in existence. That business voice has really attempted to hold the line, even in lean years, and to push for additional funding in fat years. But the business leaders are driven by the voices they hear coming up to them. So talk to your friends that work in private industries and say, hey, go ask your HR department what their childcare subsidies are, or does your company have a plan for investing in early childhood partnerships or relationships? Get that message. As the head of HR, I will tell you, if you get the employees to get the message to the head of HR, the senior HR officer will take that to the CEO and the CFO. And it's kind of like a groundswell, right? Grassroots, it's kind of what we're doing here. And when those folks hear that message, if they understand it and buy into it, it creates even more power behind the business voice to continue funding. And I really think that for good or for bad, for right or wrong, it is still such a powerful voice, and it can be far more powerful than any one voice individually, because I'm from Philadelphia, and a long time ago, there was a city councilman who famously was quoted as saying, money talks and BS walks. And because businesses have the money and the government knows it, the more we can get business to understand the importance of this and get behind it, it will drive not only public funding, but it will also drive the private investment that we also need.
Wow, thank you guys for I like to talk about money because that's what really changes everything. So I think for me, what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing in the chat, share with someone, if it's just one person, one teacher, a way to make a change. If it's not for you, it's for your neighbor's child. If it's not for them, think about your niece, your nephew, your own child. Imagine someone's child that didn't have early learning and the impact, because I'm seeing it in the later years and we need ECE. I see the time. We have time for maybe one question. If we do not reach your question this evening, we will follow up for those who have registered. We'll make sure we have the answers to those questions as well as the links so that you can continue to share. So I'm going to pass it over to Donna. And I want to say thank you to the group for just being so amazing, but thank you so much to the fellows. I'm always just honored to just support you, and you guys did a great job in bringing the community together for something that's so important. We need you. So I thank you guys for being fellows first and foremost. So thank you guys. I'm going to throw it to Donna.
Okay, I have been watching our Slido and we have one question that's clearly at the top, but I want to encourage everyone while I ask this first one, just in case we get through it quickly, to go on and vote for the next question that you'll want. So this first one, I'm going to pinpoint maybe Karen and Jen, if that's okay. I'm a teacher and I will call you out. It just says, let's see, if you could provide a status on Build Back Better, specifically the childcare and pre-K portions of it, if we know any updates on that. And also if you could provide us with some suggestions of how we could try to get it passed, that would be great.
Karen, you want me to jump in? All right, so we are the affiliate of the National Association for the Education of Young Children. And so we kind of take the cues from them on the federal policy front. The most recent intel they've shared with us is that, and this is good news, childcare and pre-K are still very much part of the discussion moving forward. They are, it sounds like, trying to come up with a like skinny version, or Build Back Better 2.0 is the other term we're hearing. What we don't know is the timing. Originally, we were hearing they wanted to try to do something before the State of the Union, which is now fast approaching. We're hearing that could drift a little further into the spring. But we are really glad to hear it doesn't sound like childcare and pre-K are things that are being targeted to come out. So that's the really good news. As far as what we can do, similar to what I just shared about our state legislators and administration, we need to make sure our congressional delegation continues to hear the drumbeat. I think we've done a fairly good job, nationwide. This has been a movement for advocates, for providers, for parents. And so we can't let that drum beat up. We need to make sure we find new ways to tell stories, make sure this issue stays in the media, stays in the forefront for our policymakers, so they know they can't ignore it, that they have to do something about it. So again, if you link up with us, we can get you to whoever your US representative is, as well as our 2 US senators. Lindsay, anything you would add there?
No, I echo everything that you just said. Just making sure that you follow our advocacy organizations throughout the state. Make sure that you're taking the action alerts that are current and present, in reaching out to your local elected officials, your state elected officials, and federal, to make sure you're sharing your story. I will say this, that they don't want to hear from us. They want to hear from you, the constituents, and your real life stories are the most impactful, because you are experiencing this life firsthand, and they are working for you. So just realize that your voice is powerful, no matter how you may feel or how intimidating it could feel. They are here to do this work for you, and your voice matters. So please, I encourage you to take action.
Thank you. And this last one, since we didn't get you on this or that one, Karen, I'm going to get you on this one. I'm going to get Karen. Our next question is, and it's super speedy. What is the possibility of early childhood education becoming part of the Pennsylvania school system, as some other states have done? And I'm guessing that this means on a grander scale than the current few pre-K counts classrooms that are housed within districts.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, but there's really different pieces to it. So is it a matter of, when I think about it, I think about, we look at public school as a public good. We look at it as something that the Commonwealth needs to fund. I think, we would always want to make sure that the Commonwealth is funding it at the right levels, but we as a society have agreed upon that. Public education doesn't just benefit that student, it benefits the entire community. So I think trying to think of ways to, have this similar outlook on early childhood, we've talked about that throughout this call. I think that only good things could come of that. It really is the same public good that public education serves in terms of the K-12 system. There's the idea of, do you put it underneath, in terms of, does it all go underneath the Department of Education? And I think that that's a really complex question that we need to really think about. Early childhood is a very specific time frame. Kiddos have very specific needs. The staff that work with them have to have very specific, competencies. And it's comprehensive. It's not just about that classroom experience. It's about how you connect with the families. It's about supporting families in other areas. So, I think that the power that we get with having things coming through our Department of Human Services is a good thing. I think here in Pennsylvania, we're really fortunate because we have Octel, where we're embedded in both of those programs, and we're really trying to pull both of those things together and coordinate things. But it's a really interesting, discussion. And at minimum, I think the idea that we need to fund it in a similar way is something that we could all agree on.
Thank you so much. We are going to have to call it there to respect everyone's time. As Brandy said, we will do our best to follow up with everyone who had a question that was not answered, and we'll also be sharing out this recording as well as the resources that were shared in the chat. Thank you to all of our panelists and our fellows for organizing this great event. Thank you to all of our attendees for your great comments and questions and engagement in the chat. We are happy to be in this work with you. We know that there is not a more important investment than investing in our youngest learners. And so please stay in touch with us. We look forward to continuing this work with you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Bye.